When you get married and there's still some baggage and trauma and things you're dealing with, that stuff doesn't go away.
I remember this one day when I said it to my mother, like, why me? And she just bursted into tears saying, like, I'm sorry, my boy.
But really the fruit of when that relationship then broke down, it left me in a pretty uncomfortable space.
Hey guys, welcome back to the You're Not Alone podcast. Today I have my good friend Phil. He's going to be speaking a little bit about his story as well as his life journey. Phil, can you please explain to the podcast a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, man, great honor and privilege to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Phil. I've actually known Luke for a long time.
Yeah.
I used to coach a bit of rugby at Parklands, and Luke was a star player. Well, he'll tell you that, and then you'll have to...
I wouldn't say star player. I mean, I think Phil put me on the bench a couple nights.
Yeah, so I've known Luke for a good while, and so my name's Phil. I'm 28 years old. I currently work as an ordained minister. My church is called Revive Church, and that's what I've been doing really pretty much since I left high school. I studied theology and got into the ministry, and it's been total roller coaster. Loads of ups and downs, but have loved the journey, and very grateful to be on podcasts like this. And your story is an inspirational one, and I'm sure every time we can have conversations and you have conversations, more hope is made, and I'm all for that. I love that.
And I thank you for joining us today. Like you said, I've known you for so long, and I think, and I dated back like literally, I think you must have known me since I was like 16 or something.
Yeah,
like
I work in grade 10. Grade 10, yeah.
And I'm like thinking now, like, what weren't you in my life at a point? You were my coach, my pastor, a friend. I remember that one time we went to the rugby and I took you guys to the box and whatnot.
Yes.
You guys can't stop smiling like we're here.
Love that, man. What a crazy experience.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
And that for me was like one of the best days because I couldn't share that moment with anyone better. Because I know you guys were such big rugby fans and whatnot. And yeah, I really appreciate that you guys could give me the chance to give you that. And
of course.
I would like you to explain, like, how did you come onto this path of becoming a pastor?
Yeah, man, it's a crazy one. I think as soon as you hear someone that's maybe a pastor or is in ministry, you can maybe picture or conceptualize maybe like what their life had looked like, but mine would have been, completely different. I grew up in a bit of a broken household. I've got two great parents. I love them, and I've never doubted their love for me, but they ultimately had a marriage that didn't quite work out. And with that came one or two other implications with that marriage as well. And unfortunately, when my sister and I got to kind of the end of primary school age, so roughly 12 or 13, my mom actually got breast cancer, which was quite a big shock for us and quite a big challenge that we all had to kind of work through. My parents weren't together at the time, so my mom was pretty isolated and alone in that time, and my sister and I would be moving between staying at our dad, and then the following year when I turned 14 and went to grade 8, we both went to boarding school. So I went to Paul boys and my sister went to girls high, and that was a crazy experience. But as soon as we had our Cape Town life, and then we had our Paul life, and up until that point there were some trials and stuff that we had navigated as a family, through the circumstances that we had, as maybe being, through the divorce and through one or two other things. So there was a couple of scars and some things that I had maybe started to carry and started to not really acknowledge or understand at 14 years old, but they're there.
Yeah.
But I always, what's been so instrumental in my life is that there's always been one or two very key people that have come alongside me and have really helped me and showed me the way. And one of those people was a guy that I actually met when I was 13. I went to Alcana before going to Paul, so I was in Alcana.
What a massive change.
Yeah, if you want to talk about a stark change, that's what you can. That's what it is. I met a guy. His name is Dino, and he has been, and to this day, he was the best man at my wedding. He's someone I met when I was 13, and he was someone that when I was around him, I always felt bigger. Yeah. I was a bit insecure growing up. I was a bit chubby. I got a little bit bullied, like grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, and you bring that together with some of the stuff that's maybe happening at home, and there's a bit of insecurity and all those things. But whenever I was around Dino, this guy, I just felt bigger. I felt confidence coming, charisma coming. I wanted to be like him because he just made how he made me feel. And then when I was my first year in boarding school and navigating the different things, that was a new challenge. But it was in the second year in grade 9 where Dino actually reached out to me and he said, you know what, why don't you come and check out youth? And he was the youth pastor of Youth Church Tableview at the time. So I came through, and it was that one night, and just you marrying the experience of somebody that I really respect and admire in Dino, and then also an encounter with a God that I had some experience with. My mom took us to church, but it was always begrudgingly. You know, I was like, got super bored. I remember taking my PSP with to church on a Sunday. I would play Tiger Woods PGA Tour in the mom's room. So that was by no means, you know, the great Sunday school kid. I was just trying to keep myself entertained. But going to youth that night was a total life-changing experience, in a sense of, I feel like I had my own kind of moment and encounter with God, and it became real for me. But the tension that stayed even after that at 15 and stayed with me all through high school was this tension of, I'm going to live one way when I'm at home here in Cape Town, Bloberg, and I'm going to go to church and it's going to be awesome. But when I'm at Paarl or in Paarl with my rugby friends, and it was different. And I kind of lived in that tension for a while of, I feel like there's more for me. I feel like God is calling me to something else, but I couldn't quite break away from falling back into patterns of behavior when I'm in Paarl with my mates that I knew wasn't God's best for me. I was a boy and naughty, and it's girls and it's trying things, and you know,
that's the boy environment going to Paarl, like literally just thinking about like, where's the next party? Where's like girls that we're gonna
totally,
and then you're trying to live this other life of like, you know, trying to be a godly person, and you're like thinking, okay, well, I gotta choose.
You try to marry that experience, and it was very difficult. And I think in that comes a bit of a anxiety that can start to brew, because you end up having two personalities.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a mask that you wear at home, and then a mask that you wear when you're with your friends, and it becomes two people. But on the inside, your soul is almost being torn in two, because you're trying to catch, you know, who am I going to be today, or how's this going to be? And that was difficult. And I got into a relationship when I was in grade 11 with a girl. And obviously, as a believer, I was very much a Christian and a believer at the time. I wanted to do that relationship in a God-honoring way and put boundaries in place that would protect that and protect what I wanted to keep for marriage. But ultimately, this relationship, I wasn't able to do that. And I was a younger guy. She was a bit older. And due to many factors, she was awesome. I haven't got a bad word to say about her at all. It was just the timing. The timing wasn't right. But really, the fruit of when that relationship then broke down, it left me in a pretty uncomfortable space. I struggled with anxiety. I struggled with insomnia. And I think what had happened is I got to the point of, I think God brought me to a place of full. You can't. This is as far as I'm going to let you go in terms of having one life and one life. You need to start to bring unity within your soul, unity with who you are and who I'm calling you to be. So I went through what I would describe and define as the most difficult season of my life. I couldn't, for the life of me, I struggled with anxiety. I couldn't sleep at night. I remember my grade 11 final exams. I was writing them on the back of not staying up, walking around the hostel. Just this inner, almost a bit of a turmoil. But in that, still trying to stay faithful in going to church and being connected with people like Dino. I then did the matric year. I actually moved out of my home at that point, and I went to go stay with Dino to provide a bit of an atmosphere and environment of stability. And in that matric year was an incredibly healing year. I still could do all the things and play the rugby, which I loved, and get my school marks back to where they should have been pretty much all along. And what Dino and his wife Kelly brought me was that stability, and all throughout that year there was a sense of, we feel, and people would say, Phil, we feel like, there's a calling, a ministry calling on your life. But for me, I just looked at my life up until that point, and I'm like, man, surely the guys who become pastors have way less baggage, have way less trauma and triggers, and way less nonsense, and they're just more clean cut and they do the business. But that was really not what I was being told and taught. People like Dino and like Graham, who was the senior pastor at the time, they saw the calling and they saw what was on me, even at times where I didn't see it in myself. So for me, it was really trusting them and leaning on them. And finished my matric year, and by no means this perfect kid. Still so much things that I had to work through and work on. But I made a decision that I'm going to try to honor God with my life. And I felt the call of, I need to do this. I need to pursue ministry and what that could potentially look like. And straight after high school, I started studying theology, which is a 3-year degree. And in that very first year of studying, I was at the Table View Church. I was then asked to come to our Sunningdale View Church, which is now Revive Church, to start a youth group. And there wasn't one.
I remember, tell me if I'm wrong, but was it the same church that started at the Bowls Club?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I remember that being like, Dumi had invited like majority of the rugby group to come and whatnot, and then we all came, and it was at the Bowls Club, and I'm like thinking, is this a church?
What is this?
Like, what are we doing? Like, where are we going? And then we walked inside there, and for me, like I was originally Catholic,
yes.
and we went to catechism and whatnot, and it was very strict rules on like what you could do and whatnot. And for me, when I went into that church, I was like, whoa,
what are these guys doing?
Where's like the water where we go in first?
Yeah.
Step out. And then you guys like, your first opening was obviously just sing and pray and whatnot. And I'm like thinking, whoa, normally we do this at the end.
Yes.
For me, that was, and it wasn't just like your normal like choir singing. It was like pop, like Christian music, and like going into it. And I'm like thinking, I enjoy this more. Like as much as I'm not putting down like with catechism and whatnot.
Not
obviously
at all.
I learned a lot through them. But like, for me, like that, as a young person, when I went back then, it was more, how could I say, relatable.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
I could actually get into it. I could actually go behind it and say like, I can sing this song because, you know, it has a bit of like more of a jam to it.
Yeah.
Rather than your choir singing, just going all together.
So that was us just having a go.
Yeah.
So I mean, we were asked to start a youth group, or I was asked to start a youth group, and then my then girlfriend, now wife, Sean Marie, came with and almost was a part of everything, which was awesome. But Alcana, where we were doing church on a Sunday, Alcana High School, we were our church was functioning out of there. At that point, didn't have a venue for us for a Friday night youth program. So we're like, well, you know, what are we going to do? Like, where we? And then we just asked around and tried what we could do. And then this Bowls Club at the Sunningdale Sports Complex were like, we can give you a Friday night or 4 Friday nights a month for X amount. And we sort of, cool, we'll take it. And then we set up, and I started coaching at Parklands and met kids like you and Dumi and so many of these other guys, incredible guys. And that was all part of, I think, God's plan and getting out there. But the journey to that point and then the journey after is, you know, it's been a total roller coaster. And I could never have predicted what God would do.
I mean, like hearing, like when I look at you and Dumi, and I'm like thinking, you know, like how, isn't it crazy how I would say God has put you two together for him? Because I see Dumi as your almost like your, I'm gonna use Star Wars, your Padawan.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
love that.
And I see Dumi like enjoying the like your conversation around God, and I can see how you shaped him in a way of becoming a better person. And like you should, I don't think you've actually even looked at it that way, because the way I looked at Dumi back then was the guy that broke my collarbone in grade 4.
Oh no! But so you hate him?
No. I didn't hate him. Been my captain for many years.
There you go.
But like after like him meeting you and whatnot, like this person that you shaped him into, like becoming around God and whatnot. And I don't mean in a way that he wasn't godly in person.
No.
But I mean, the way he talks about God now, I think is because of how you've actually introduced him and whatnot. And like I said like what I said to you before this podcast is, when you can change one person's life, isn't that just mind-blowing?
It is.
Yeah.
No, I think that experience was very similar to what Dino gave to me. So Dino was that, and someone, and listen, me at 13 or 14 and 15 and Dumi at 13 or 14 and 15, I think are stark differences. Dumi and his brother Sija as well, incredibly mature, strong charactered, built on incredible morals. So I can't actually compare myself at 14 to Dumi at 14 or 15, because he just wipes me under the table. But what Dino could do for me was someone that I could look ahead to, someone who was a few years down the line, and someone that could almost speak life and encourage and be there for me. I tried to be that for them. So their parents weren't, their dad and their mom both work abroad, and they're incredible people, but they weren't always at the home with them. So for me, I just thought, it's a great opportunity to, firstly, I like them. There's divine flow. We laugh, we enjoy stuff. We've got a lot of similar interests. And I thought, I don't have a lot of, money, for example. I was kind of starting out studying, but when I did get money, I thought, I couldn't think of a better thing to spend it on than going to get us all some food and hanging out and playing PlayStation. But what you do in those moments where you just think less about yourself and more maybe about the environment and about the people, is that there is an impact that happens there. And I should have remembered, because those were the types of things that Dino did for me, and being able to do that for Dumi and with their brother, and in those moments it was incredibly fun, and I love that. But you can see that there's a lasting impact there when someone can believe in you and encourage you.
I mean, there's a saying where you only need one person to say I believe in you, like literally to conquer the world. And do anything you want to do, is just need that one person to say I believe in you. You can do this, you can do whatever you want, you can be whatever you want, and say whatever you want, in that sense of I'll back you.
That's so true, man.
And I think when I think of your story as well, it's like you say you come from a broken home, but then isn't it funny how God put you almost in a sense of where you have family now, in a different sense, not like where you have people always like saying like, Phil, you did this for me, Phil, you said this, and it's just now great that you can do this. And I think that's in a sense how I even put it, is like he had a plan for you from the beginning. And when you may have not thought of it back then, isn't it like, I always say, if you can now put yourself now and back then, did you ever think about like that your life would ever lead to this?
Not for 1 second. And I really can't take anything that I'll do now that could potentially have a positive impact on people. I really just can't take credit for, because I've just felt in so many different seasons and in moments, for me personally, as a God-fearing person, as someone who believes in Jesus and the Bible, I've just experienced God's grace. There have been so many moments in my life where I have fallen short, where I haven't had enough, where there wasn't enough strength, or there wasn't enough emotional energy, or whatever it may be, in any situation where I haven't quite had enough. But I've just felt God's grace has really filled the gaps. And I think even from what I've shared earlier to then, I got married when I was 23 to Jean-Marie, and we've been married 5 years now. Even in that has been like the most high highs, but also when you get married and there's still some baggage and trauma and things you're dealing with, that stuff doesn't go away. You don't get married and think sometimes the what you can believe is I'll get married and all my problems are solved. It's like, no, unfortunately what happens is if you don't go back and deal and work through certain things, you just have the same problems, not as a 15-year-old, but now as a 35-year-old or as a 45-year-old. So even in the process of getting married, I've just seen, even in the tough moments where we've had to navigate different things and figure out stuff about ourselves, God has been gracious to us, and his grace has covered so many gaps, so many pitfalls, so many shortfalls. So yeah, for me, like to be able to think back at, geez, a 15-year-old Phil coming to youth for the first time, and then look at my life now, I'm incredibly grateful. And I'm grateful for the low moments and the low seasons, because you learn a lot about yourself and you learn a lot about God in those moments where things aren't easy. And for me, where I draw great encouragement is Psalm 23. It speaks about God being the good shepherd, the one who lays you down beside peaceful streams. And it says, even when you walk through the darkest valley, I will not leave you, is the promise. And he says his rod and his staff will comfort and protect you. So the scripture's not saying if, it's saying when. So there's going to be moments and seasons of life where it's a dark valley, and it's not the peaceful stream. It's not the green pastures as Psalm 23 starts, but there's this climb from, hey, there's going to be good times and there's going to be difficult moments. I'm with you in both. And to learn how to trust his plan. It's much easier for me now to look back at some of the difficult moments as a teenager or as a young husband and be like, this is hard. Like, it would be so much easier if I just did X or just did Y. It's easier to look back now because God has brought me through that. I'm hoping that a lesson that I can continue to learn and take is that when I encounter another difficult moment or difficult season in my life, I can be like, man, God has been faithful for me before. I'm sure he'll be faithful for me in this one.
And with like going your difficult like times and whatnot, do you feel like they help you in a sense of ways of like being able to connect with people like that, or
immensely. I found my greatest. So if we take it back to maybe our experience as a youth pastor, being someone who came from kind of a divorced family, someone who moved out early, there were some experiences that I had. And I don't think I would have been able to connect as easy with some kids who were going through the same things if I didn't have those experiences. So for me, it's a very different perspective to look back at the tough times in your life and to say, God's going to use this. Yeah. Because in that moment, you're like, why is this happening? Like, have I upset God? Like, did I do something that I wasn't supposed to do? And then you got to remind yourself, God is not always looking at things linear and how we see things. He's got this bird's eye view, this perspective that from year 0 to year 75 or 85, if we're lucky, he's got that. So he can see something that I go through as a 7 or an 8 or a 9-year-old and already be reflecting and knowing that when Phil's a youth pastor at 21 or 22, these experiences are going to actually help him connect and build common ground and build commonality with young people. So when they see him, they don't see this prim and proper. And listen, I'm not coming at anybody who's gotten into the ministry in that way. Yeah. But for me, I took the ground road. I really did. I took the dirt road, and I think when people saw that, and not every kid has that experience, but the kids that did have a bit of a dirt road experience growing up, they saw me and they were able to relate. And they were able to say, well, if God can do it for Phil, geez, if he could do it for Phil, he could probably do it for me as well.
And I mean, a lot of people ask, like, to God and say, why me? Like, what have I done? I have not done anything.
Yeah.
I should deserve this or anything. And that was even me when I was in hospital. And,
I'm sure.
I said that to, I remember this one day when I said it to my mother, like, why me? And she just bursted into tears saying, like, I'm sorry, my boy. And when I came out of hospital and I had these days, and I'm like thinking now when I do this podcast and I talk to people about their life stories and whatnot, I was like, I think he had a reason for it. And I, like, to my personal relationship with God, I say he's got a sense of humor that we don't understand.
We don't.
Where he had to show us this way to understand how other people go through. And although I went through a different story to your story, I still feel the sense of hurt that you went through first, but now you sense the reason why you went through something like that, because now you can connect with people that you maybe even thought, if I didn't go through something like that, I can connect with them.
Yeah, 100%.
And I feel like that's almost a sense of why I say and why I call this You're Not Alone, because I can now say, like, although I didn't go through the same thing, I know what it means to you going through something like that, and now finding almost like peace in a sense of your story, what you do, and how you help people in the sense of like finding God and whatnot. Do you feel like when you started your whole thing with this ministry and the helping at the View Church and whatnot, Revive Church, where you feel like some kids are a bit harder to like?
Oh, my hat, yeah. Definitely. There was the Bible talks about soil, and it talks about the soil of one's heart. And some soil is ready and receptive, some soil is hard, some soil is rocky. And I think we've got to understand that the only one who can change and cultivate the soil of one's heart is God. But what we can be faithful and responsible to do is sow the seed. So for me, there were plenty of times where I encountered young people that were very hard and kind of like, no, like, don't need God, like, Phil, it's fine. And I can, in those moments, I can be like, take offense and be like, like, these kids suck or whatever the deal is. That's very easy to do. I can make it personal if I want to. But it's also, you've got to understand that, people are going through different things. And those young people, there could be plenty of reasons as to why they could be hard to an idea of church or youth or of God. And that's fine. But also to understand that I can't let myself grow discouraged in moments where it feels like people are pushing me away, because my responsibility is not the condition of your heart. It's God has called me to sow seed. So for me, it's put your hand in the bag of the seed and just keep sowing words of encouragement, words of love. If people are wanting to come around and build and be a part of church and youth and so on and so forth, awesome. If they're not, the Bible doesn't teach, and the demonstration of Jesus was not, hey, find the people that love God and love church and love them. He said, love your neighbor. And then he didn't define who the neighbor was. He said, love your neighbor. And that's a revelation that's going to drop for people, for believers, that the church is not called just to love and protect and be with the Christians. You got to love people. and whatever they find themselves in. And for me, that was an early lesson, because kids can be cruel.
Yeah, no.
Back in those high school days, they didn't make it not obvious that they were not interested in church or whatever it may be. And I had to learn and develop and grow in that. But for me, the big lesson there was that, these are all people that are going through different seasons and different moments of life. If I can't be someone that leads them closer to God, can I at least be someone who they enjoyed? Can I at least be someone that they had a laugh with? Yeah. If I was their rugby coach and they never came to church or youth, they weren't interested in that, but they enjoyed me being around, that potentially leaves a little door open down the line if things happen. And maybe the soil begins to change. And they can say, well, you know what? I knew a Christian guy 10, 15 years ago. He actually wasn't half bad.
Yeah.
Maybe the church is something that I can give a go or have a look at. That was my view.
It was a form of trust almost that you were trying to first lay down.
Have to start there.
Yeah. I relate on to what you just said, where kids can be rude. I do sometimes time coaching also at school. Did rugby and soccer, and I must say, geez, I'm thinking, I'm somewhat close to their age and whatnot. I'm thinking,
young, relevant, cool.
Yeah, I fit in. I think my first day I wanted to quit because those kids, they just tear you apart from the beginning.
They tear you apart. And I think it's getting more hectic, to be honest. I still think you guys were somewhat, decent and mature and stuff. I think it's getting more hectic.
No, and some of the things they say, I'm thinking, how old am I? Because when they first told me you need to rizz up these people, I'm what did you just tell me? What did you just call me? And then they would explain to me all this lingo and whatnot. I'm like, so this is how age has done to me.
So this is what's happened.
Yeah.
I'm now irrelevant. I felt like that all the time, man. All the time.
A shame. I wanted to ask you, so was there any quotes or anything, words that you lived by the whole time of your life or anything like that? Maybe someone told you, maybe you read from the Bible.
Yeah.
Was there anything that
That's a great question. I think for me, there's probably be two things that have stood the test of time listen, I've heard a lot of stuff. Being in the atmosphere that I'm in, there's sermons, there's teachings and equippings and all that stuff. So you learn a lot of good stuff. One thing that I feel God put on my heart as a young man, even before ministry, was this verse in Isaiah verses 40-8 that says, 40 verse 8, that says, the grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of my God stands forever. And that verse almost speaks into kind of the temporary nature of this life, even of our bodies, really, is that things will happen in this life. The flower, it almost speaks to the luxuries, and maybe there's moments where you've got a lot, but even that can fade in this life. Not saying that it will. The grass withers. That speaks a bit maybe even to some of the essentials like shelter and food. There could even be moments where you go without those. But then the scripture lands on, but it's the word of God that stands forever. And the verse always spoke to me in a sense of I need to cling to what is eternal. Don't build your life on something that can fade. It's not saying it will, but the potential for things of this world and of this life to fade and wither is always there. Build your life on something eternal. The wise man built his house upon the rock.
Yeah.
The wise man built his house, or the foolish built his house on the sand, something that was shifting, that could change. He could build it and it stood for a while, but when the storms of life came, when the wind beats down, when you get a diagnosis that you weren't prepared for, when you lose that friend, when something goes down and the winds begin to beat, it's the man who built his life on the rock that withstood the storm. And that rock for me has been firstly the word of God, but just relationship with Jesus is one who never changes. So that would be one that really stood out to me. And the second one would just be the words, by his grace. By his grace, that we do anything. I think it's so easy that even in ministry, things can go well. You preach some good sermons, you build some things, and maybe your youth group gets big or your church. It's very easy to start taking the credit for something that's not your credit to take. It's by God's grace that we get to do this. It's by his grace that we stay in this place of humility, by his grace that we can be a part of what God is doing in the world. So for me, I try to remind myself in my good seasons and my bad seasons, it's by his grace that I do this. Lean more on the grace than on my ability to preach or my ability to be wise or my ability to be a good friend. Lean more on his grace. It's by his grace, the grace that doesn't run out, the grace that overflows. Lean on that. The other stuff is good, and it's gifting that he's given you and I. But it's by his grace that we can do anything significant. Those have been two things that have always kind of stuck with me.
That's so much to take in from my side, because I'm like thinking, what do I say after that? And I'm like, that's so cool that you can think of it that way. And I've obviously got a lot to learn still with my relationship with God. And I always say, like, a lot of people ask me, why don't you go to church and whatnot? I'm just not ready to hear what other people have to say about him yet. And that's just my personal opinion. My relationship I had with him, especially when I was in hospital. I'll eventually probably I'll go to church and hear other opinions and whatnot, but like my relationship with him right now is very solitude with him, like just reading the Bible at home and whatnot. But I would love to like return to your guys' like church, because that's the only church that I actually felt comfortable talking about him and actually having conversations and whatnot. It's just obviously when you talk to someone about God, you have to be prepared to hear what they think of him.
Sure.
Because I believe that everyone has a different perspective. I know everyone speaks about the same thing of what he's done and whatnot, but everyone does have a different perspective on like how they view him or how they say what he's done and whatnot. And for me, that's like, I'm not ready to share that yet. And I think it's so cool that you are so accepting with other people when they say, you know, Phil, this is what I think about God and this is how I think, and you just say, that's so cool, but I'm so happy that you have a relationship with him. That's, for me, is the great understanding. And I heard this one quote, if someone had to say to you, what's the one thing that you don't feel is not being understood?
Oh wow, that's deep.
And I think when you tell me about that story, I always wanted to ask you one question. Do you feel that you are doing something that God wanted you to do?
That's probably one of the few things that I have a full conviction on in life. I think there's so many things. I mean, my marriage and the person I've married to, I've got full conviction that's who God has got for me. And being in the ministry, I feel like, is another thing. It's very hard to explain because it's quite a personal conviction and a personal thing that you go through with God. But I would feel that if I wasn't serving God in a full-time capacity, I would not be being obedient to the call that God has for my life. Now, that's not the same for everybody. There's some people that will serve God in a part-time capacity, that will do their job, and it can look different. But for me, it's I really do feel like, now this is the thing that I need to be doing. What that can look like, that can change, and it most likely will change. I'm not married to any one method, but I am very much married to the message that Jesus saves, and I feel like God has asked me to be somewhat of a mouthpiece for that, but also just to be available to do whatever he wants me to do in that. So I've got a full conviction, and as long as God wants me, I'll be ready and be available. And if he wants me to do something else, I just ask him to speak clearly, and then I'll listen. Please. And make it clear, God, make it easy for me to understand. And then I'll do something else. But as for right now, I feel like God has graced me for this. And I'm going to continue to do it until he says move.
With the move, you got to start packing up all this stuff. It's like, this is what you wanted me to do. I always say I can't wait until the day I get to if I get to heaven.
Of course you will, man.
I get to the point where I say, I want you to show me how you pictured my life if I've done everything you wanted, to the point of how I live my life, and I just want to see the difference of what, like, if I actually thought of you in the time, like, was I supposed to do this, was I supposed to do that, and I think at the end of the day I'm just gonna laugh probably, because I'm gonna be like, yeah, you gave me the choice of like freedom in my own way, but if I lived your life, it looks like I would have lived a happier life. But I'm trying to do as much as you can.
Yeah, I agree. I think that could maybe be a bit disappointing. But what's so good about God is, I heard a great analogy. Like, if you type in something on Google Maps, for example, you've got a destination, and you take a wrong turn. What Google Maps does, it does the reroute, and then wherever you are, it will give you a new way to get to where you need to be. And I feel like in life, we often are taking a detour, and we'll do things, we'll go the wrong way, or we'll do something different. And I can think of, a bunch of times where in my head I've probably detoured from the plan, detoured from what God has for me. But that's why I lean so heavily on God's grace, because I know his ability not only to set the destination, but also to reroute when I get off path. So I believe that even in that picture, God will say, you know what, we got there.
Yeah, eventually.
we got there. You took a bit longer, but we got there. And again, that just speaks to his grace, that he'll stay with us and use us even where we fall short and go the wrong way.
This is normally the question I asked at the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
What does "You're Not Alone" mean to you?
Yeah, for me, I love it, man. I love your light. "You're Not Alone" for me speaks to community. I think for me personally, I can't tell you, the 5 greatest sermons I've heard, but I can name 5 people who've changed and impacted my life. And I think when I think about the term "you are not alone," I think about those people. I think about the people that at different seasons and different moments of my life came alongside me and didn't just do the bare minimum, but came alongside me and really gave me an example, really gave me something over and above generosity, love, kindness, and became a picture of Jesus for me when I really needed it and before I opened a book. So when I think about "You Are Not Alone," I think about that principle of people can change things, and God will use people to change things. So if you're listening to this podcast, and maybe you can probably already think there's 2 or 3 people that have been significant in your life, I would take it one step further and say, are we being that for other people as well? So it's easy to go, hey, these are 2 or 3 people that have been amazing for me. I think it's to challenge yourself as well and to say, is there 1 or 2 people? Is there someone that I can pull alongside that might be going through a tough moment, that might be struggling, might be a bit younger, so on and so forth, that I can pull alongside, that I can help, that I can support, that I can be that for. So when they get to a moment, or they're sitting on a podcast like this and they think about "You Are Not Alone," they can say, you know what, that is so true. Yeah. Because there were moments where I really felt alone, and everything about my life should have indicated that I was alone, but there were these people, there was that person in that moment and in that season that made me feel like I wasn't alone.
And I totally agree with that. Where I feel like when you have one person, at least you can say, even when it comes to your funeral, that guy right there, I wouldn't have gone anywhere without him or her. And for me, it's understanding that having that person, or whether it be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever, but having a person that will be just behind you and just pushing your back when you feel like you've been knocked down and whatnot. I understand in life you have to do some things alone, but it doesn't mean that you won't have people there to say you can do it. I know you can do it. And it's like what Dino did for you. It's just saying, well, you can do it. I know maybe you don't feel like it, but you're gonna do it.
He was never afraid to have a hard conversation with me when I needed it. Hey Phil, come on, this is what you want. But with every hard conversation were 5 or 6 or 7 moments of extreme generosity, where he came in and showed how much he loved. And Dino would just be one of a few, but Dino definitely was someone that really stands out for me.
Phil, I want to say thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. And again, I haven't seen you in a while, and it's always great seeing you and great having a conversation with you. Such a bubbly and live person. I wish I was someone like that. Normally people say I look like a walking zombie, but that's just my resting bitch face. But I thank you so much for joining me on this podcast, and I only wish you the much of the very best.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you soon at the Revive Church.
Come on, thank you, man. It's a huge pleasure, and must say I'm very proud of you, and having watched your story and seen and observed how you were able to turn something around, and now you're using it to help and to love on other people. I think that's incredibly inspirational. And I know this channel and this podcast and yourself, the sky's the limit, man. Excited to hear about some of the things that are in the future. And I feel very, very blessed and very honored to have been in the room. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you guys for joining the podcast today, and hopefully see you guys next time. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.